Good morning, I'm Cheryl Attkisson. Welcome to the debut of Full Measure. Donald Trump launched his presidential campaign with tough talk about immigration. Today we examine the challenges of refugees coming to America, and we'll ask Trump if his hard line on illegal immigration extends to legal refugees and asylum seekers fleeing the Mideast and Africa in incredible numbers. But first, how do Americans feel about taking on refugees from Syria? Millions have already fled in desperation under attack from their own government as well as ISIS Islamic extremists. President Obama has decided to accept nearly 200,000 refugees by 2017. A new Full Measure Rasmussen Reports poll released today finds a majority of Americans think we should take fewer. 28% say 200,000 is too many. Another 28% say we should accept no refugees at all. 27% say they're okay with 200,000, and 10% say that's too few. When asked about the impact the refugees would have on America's security, 56% say the refugees would make America more dangerous, 7% say it would make the U.S. safer, 25% say it would have no impact, and 12% were unsure. What you may not know is that many asylum seekers and refugees are already here. We visited one American town grappling with the financial and cultural impact of the unexpected newcomers. These may look like city scenes from Africa or the Mideast, but they're actually in Maine, where families like the Syrian are coming to seek asylum. Tadi Syrian was a government official in Burundi, East Africa, which he says is devolving under the post-Arab Spring instability that's causing refugees to flee. But why are some ending up in, of all places, Lewiston, Maine? The Syrian were pointed here after they arrived in Boston. At the airport, a fellow African noticed they seemed lost.
And approached them and told them the best place now they can go is Lewiston, or Maine.
Ashkan Tibet is also in Lewiston, seeking asylum from Djibouti, East Africa, fleeing an arranged marriage.
I came to Lewiston because I learned that there were many Djiboutians living in Lewiston, and I thought I could get help by them and I can be supported by the community.
Lewiston, Maine is struggling to build a new economy after its once bustling textile mills shut down. Today it's become a magnet for asylum seekers, catching everyone off guard, including Mayor Robert McDonald.
And I had never heard of asylum. I didn't even know what this was. But I went up to the welfare office, and I was up there, and they were telling me, and they said, oh, we got a whole bunch of people. I think they were from the Congo. They speak beautiful French. I said, really? That's beautiful. I said, because I have jobs. Yeah, send them here. Can't because they're asylum seekers. They can't work.
Unlike refugees who are allowed to work right away, asylum seekers are different. While their applications are processed, federal law prohibits them from getting jobs, and they're not eligible for most aid. That's why they come to Maine. It's one of the few places that does give welfare to asylum seekers. Phil Nadeau is Deputy City Administrator.
You know, a family might be eligible for a voucher to pay for rent, which, you know, on average could be about $500 or $600 a month.
And it's not just rent. They may get help with medicine, food, and utilities, all courtesy of local taxpayers. The immigrants know the benefits as City Hall. Explain how you're getting by, how you're getting along.
The City Hall support me.
Lewiston is now caring for people from at least 30 different countries.
We were told we had to take care of these people out of our pocket. No federal money, no state money. Just because they showed up here, we were responsible for.
Town officials know the more aid they provide, the more immigrants they'll attract. They know because of their first immigration crisis.
We believe that we have record of the first families arriving in February of 2001.
The first wave consisted of refugees from Somalia, East Africa, including Saeed Mohammed.
Middle Israel.
Mohammed and his family were originally placed in Atlanta, but he says they encountered a culture clash, with Somalis worried their kids would imitate bad behavior in poor neighborhoods where refugees settled.
With rags, with patches down, with derogatory languages, in rap music. Then they started, no, that's not what we want. Yeah.
So you heard or you felt that the environment in Maine would be more what you were looking for your family?
Yes, and since most of the Somalis have a large families, so they were looking a safe place. They know that it's no, state, and that may not make happy. And also they know that most of the men are white people. That is their major. And
so
fear.
You compromise, you live with a lot of white people in a snowy, cold state, but you like it.
Yes.
If the Somalis had to adjust, so did many residents of Lewiston, who found Muslim culture brand new. The only previous Muslim visitor most knew of was Muhammad Ali. He won a championship fight in Lewiston back in 1965.
I think a lot of people at that time were surprised that the fight was scheduled to be here in Lewiston.
In 2001, a few Somali refugees became 50. By the end of 2002, there were about 1,000 Somalis in a town of 36,000. They brought their culture to every downtown street. Mayor McDonald says many locals felt the newcomers should adopt American ways.
Leave your culture at the door, okay? Leave your culture at the door.
What does that mean?
That means we have a certain culture here. Don't start mixing ours in with yours, okay? And that goes for Europeans, that goes for Asians, and that goes for anybody else. We have a specific culture here. I've told them that many times. I said, look, you've got to assimilate.
Fueling resentment was the fact that elderly and disabled Americans were on waiting lists for assistance, while the Somalis swallowed up nearly a third of Lewiston's welfare budget. In 2002, then Mayor Larry Raymond wrote a controversial open letter asking the Somalis to stop coming. Please pass the word. Our city is maxed out financially, physically, and emotionally. For that, he got accused of bigotry. McDonald, the current mayor, says the implication still sticks.
We had a person here the other night. She was an immigration attorney. And she pointed out, she said, well, Maine's the whitest state in the union. What exactly does that mean? I said, I know what it means. What you're doing is you're calling us racists. I said, there's nobody down there at the borders telling people to leave. The people, I think if you go down and talk to the Somalis, what you do, you'll see that they feel very welcome here, okay? I have a good relationship with them.
The Maine people are very good people. They welcome the Somalis.
Today, the Mohammeds own a popular ethnic market.
This is a photo of my whole family. We have 8 kids together here.
Mohammed tells us 3 of their children have become a doctor, an accountant, and an engineer. McDonald says the Somalis have become good citizens, but he worries how Lewiston can manage a new flood of asylum seekers.
They're costing us a fortune because they're costing the people of Lewiston, not the state of Maine, not the federal government, but the city of Lewiston is being taxed for that.
Today, there are about 5,000 refugees and asylum seekers in the Lewiston area, 10% of the population consuming 40% of the welfare.
Policymakers have a very difficult job to do. There's not a lot of resources, and they're trying to divide up a progressively smaller pie every single year.
The competition for scarce resources poses a dilemma other U.S. towns are likely to face in greater numbers. There's an endless population of deserving immigrants.
People welcomed us warmly and support us. I feel like I've been here forever, and I feel like I belong to this place.
But taking on these immigrants means difficult choices.
Is the town, is the state better off because of this diversity that's happened?
No, I'm not going to say it is, because as far as I'm concerned, I don't care if you're black, white, yellow, or what we want is people that are going to help us move forward.
After months of debate, a new state law takes effect October 15th that will require Maine taxpayers to share in supporting the cost of asylum seekers by paying cities 70% of their expenses. Europe is the first stop and final destination for many of the Syrian refugees. Full Measure correspondent Scott Thuman takes us to Britain and France, where people who are desperate for a safe haven also pose serious security questions.
It is known by one name, the Jungle, a refugee camp on the outskirts of Calais, France, the last stop before getting to England and the last hope for thousands. It is sadly one of many, from the masses in Hungary to those in Germany, Austria to Lebanon, each border hosting its own crisis, a crush of people that can't be controlled and yet won't be stopped. Back in Calais, they risk their lives in nightly attempts to leave. Here we witness a group make the 2-hour trek, hoping to sneak aboard a train headed for Great Britain. Every morning, a slightly smaller group returns. A few, it seems, have made it across.
You said you know people who've done that, who've gotten away?
Yeah, some of our friends, yeah, they have.
Yeah. All the way to the UK?
Yeah. Scotland, London, Manchester, United, Liverpool, all of them there.
More often than not, it seems they are caught, despite what would almost literally seem a needle in a haystack challenge for police, who on this day we watch find 2 women stowed away in a semi-truck.
How long were you in the truck?
10 hours.
Across the region, nations' walls go up. The added fencing, barbed wire, and constant police presence are needed because many say there's just no way of knowing who is among these camps, a sort of quality control.
You don't want anyone to come through who is coming into this country because they are part of a terror gang, and we cannot be blind to the fact that threat exists. We know there are people who are working with ISIL in the Middle East, who want to plan and are actively seeking to plan, terror attacks on the UK and other Western countries.
And there is another factor here.
Refugees tell me that they escape the so-called jungle successfully every single day, whether it's by getting through the barbed wire and onto trucks or ferries, or something even more extreme.
Traffickers. Nathan Johnston is a volunteer medic here.
And you hear much about the smugglers?
Not really, they're very guarded because obviously the smugglers have a lot to lose and they're quite powerful people.
That is an international criminal group of people that has to be cracked down on as well, and that is another very important part of our response.
Because they're not just going to bring across a refugee who has money, they will also bring across people who would come here perhaps to do harm.
Well, I think they're people without scruple.
A daunting effect that halts the asylum process for refugees like Ali Ibrahim. Ali claims he was a sniper in the Syrian army, but rather than keep killing, he quit. So he was tortured by Assad's men, he says, and made sure he couldn't shoot again for either side.
See the bone?
So they beat him with a hammer?
Something like that, yes. That's him what you said, yes, with a hammer.
The stories are countless.
I'm being honest, everyone's sucker. Everyone's same. But you have children as well. You have women bring it. And same, you have people diabetic. Like people is cooking in dirty water, plenty of bacteria, no hygiene.
Few say there is hard evidence that terrorists are getting past police and onto British-bound trains or stowing away in semis, but there's truly no way of knowing who is. One ISIL claim, 4,000 jihadists have snuck through. A Lebanese government official suggests 1 in 50 are operatives.
There's a lot of people coming every day. I don't know where I come from. You don't know me who I am. That's the problem.
It's not really black and white on that. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. I've treated lots of different people here and with lots of different political views.
As varied as they might be, they do have one common thread: desperation and the yearning to do whatever it takes to find a new home. Not willing to accept that the many nations now deciding their fate are at a crossroads, and the wait an unbearable one.
Scott Thuman's here now. How concerned are Europeans with the possibility that ISIS could be infiltrating the refugees?
Well, that's a real and present danger. There's no arguing that. But it's not just about the now, it's about the eventual. And experts I talked to are very concerned that there is a brewing, arguably larger risk that'll show itself in years to come here in the United States unless we tackle it today. And that will be the subject of our report next week here on Full Measure.
Scott, thanks. Some intelligence experts say U.S. policy is partly to blame for the conditions causing refugees to flee. Next week, our interview with the Obama administration's former ambassador to Syria. He resigned last year, saying he could no longer support the president's policies. Coming up, we sit down with Donald Trump. So how many refugees should we take?
Well, certainly from Syria, I would take none.
Hey, buddy, let's get these Dayquil liquid gels and go.
Donald Trump's views on illegal immigration are what first put him on the map as a presidential candidate. Earlier this week, we asked the Republican frontrunner what role he thinks the U.S. should play in the Syrian refugee crisis.
I think it's insanity to take 200,000 people. When you take 200,000 people, it's very hard to do anything about it. Problem, we don't know who they are. I mean, this could be a ISIS army. This could be brilliant people from ISIS saying, let's infiltrate the United States. We don't know. You know, when I see all of the migration, so many of them are men. You don't see that many women. And you see sections where they're all men, and they look like very hale and hearty people. They look like they could be soldiers very easily. So we're going to take 200,000 people. We have no idea who they are. They have no credentials. They have no information on these people. I think we're nuts.
So how many refugees should we take?
Well, certainly from Syria, I would take none. We can't take in people as much as I'd like to do it on a humane basis. And initially I said, you know, we should do something. And you could maybe do in Syria, as an example, you do a safe zone where you take a large piece of land and you do a safe zone with other countries. But that's got to be a problem that's handled by Germany and all the other countries. And you see what's happening. They're being inundated. They're being flooded. Their politicians are now, all of a sudden, at the first day, everybody was so happy. Now, all of a sudden, they want to throw Merkel out of office. By the way, the Gulf states are taking nobody. And they have the money. And they're right there.
You now are in the lead, of course. The question is, as other candidates drop off, how do you get their support? Because if their support were to coalesce behind a second candidate or a different candidate, that could bump you. How is it you think you might pull some of that support?
I just think all I can do is continue to do what I'm doing. I'm self-funding. I'm not controlled by any of the lobbyists or the special interests who do not have the country at heart. Believe me, they only have their client at heart or their country at heart. Because in many cases, you have countries that are hiring lobbyists and special interests, and then they would rather do a good job for their country than the country where they reside or where they're a citizen, which is our country. So I can't tell you, I can only say that I think as people drop out, I think I will be surprisingly strong.
More with Trump next, including whether he'd consider partnering with any of his Republican opponents as a running mate. And this. Would the White House be a step down in terms of luxury for you? With apparent animosity at times between Trump and some of his Republican opponents, we wanted to know who he views as a potential deputy on the ticket. Do you see a possibility of a Fiorina, Carson, Bush, somebody like that as a vice president for you?
Well, you never know. It's early, and it's something I don't even want to think about right now, but certainly something like that could happen.
Do you see yourself as a potential vice president for any one of them?
I don't see that, no. Somehow I don't see that. I don't see myself in that position. I don't know. You know, it's a very important position. I don't want to demean the position, but I don't really see that.
You're not the number two.
Well, it's not. I'm not saying that in a braggadocious way. I'm not sure that a lot of people would want me as the number two.
In simple terms, and I mean just a line if you can, how would you describe a Democrat, a Republican, and a socialist? Because there is a socialist running in this race.
Well, a Republican wants to make our country fiscally strong. A Democrat wants to give a lot of money away, and the socialist wants to give everything away and have no incentive for anybody to work.
Are you a flip-flopper?
Not too much. I usually like to stay the course, but certainly I do evolve and I do change, and I have ideas that are much different than when I was younger. I had ideas that were quite a bit different. But as time goes by, you do change, but I'm not much of a flip-flopper, no.
Would the White House be a step down in terms of luxury for you?
Well, the White House is never a step down. I do have some incredible houses, Mar-a-Lago and Palm Beach, and in Trump Tower, incredible places. But the White House, because of what it represents, is only a step up.
Would you redecorate, change anything?
Well, I'd make sure it'd be beautiful. It would be absolutely immaculate, and I'd take a look around. But I wouldn't redecorate with government money. It would be with my money, and it would be left there permanently. But the White House is a very, very special place and means so much.
Trump told us that running for president has taught him how smart Americans are. As you might guess, he did not have the same compliment for we, the news media. Ahead, it's called silly season in Washington. It's when federal agencies go on a frenetic spending spree with your tax dollars. We'll tell you what they're buying and why.
Lysol disinfectant spray kills 99.9% of...
This week, a full measure thumbs down goes to the Secret Service for conspiring to attack a political adversary. Republican Congressman Jason Chaffetz was leading probes into Secret Service misconduct when 45 officers viewed, shared, or leaked private personnel files to embarrass him. Chaffetz had applied for a Secret Service job he didn't get a decade ago. Chaffetz told me every single view of his file was a violation of federal law. The question is, will the feds hold their own accountable? A regular feature on Full Measure will be Follow the Money, where we highlight taxpayer waste. Today our focus is silly season in Washington, also known as the September spending spree.
We often heard at every level of people having money at the end, use it or lose it, get rid of it, spend it, or you won't get it next year.
At a congressional hearing this week, we got to hear some of last silly season's egregious examples. Last year, the State Department ran up a bar tab close to $100 grand in a last rush to buy liquor before the end of the fiscal year. And the VA, Veterans Affairs, spent over $1.8 million tax dollars buying art.
We have some great therapeutic programs for our veterans. They do artwork. Why are we not using that artwork in our VAs? Wasteful spending. We have to do better for our taxpayers. We certainly should be doing better for our men and women in uniform and those veterans.
It's estimated this year's September spending spree will approach $500 billion. Before we leave, we want to connect with you. You'll find a live stream of the show and videos on our website, fullmeasure.news. Thank you for spending part of your Sunday with us. I'm Cheryl Attkisson. We'll be watching for more stories holding powers accountable. See you online.